Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hot in the city tonight, New York. Well, St. Louis anyway, it is hot. Welcome to Donnybrook. I'm sitting in for Charlie Brennan. Stay cool in all seriousness. Hydrate. Hydrate Wendy Wiese from KTRS, Jennifer and Wendy Show. One of our founders, Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Another founder, Ray Hartmann from Substack, and possibly reading this column someplace else here pretty soon. We'll sit on that for a while, okay? And sitting in for me, Sarah Fenske from Euclid Media Group. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay. Well, Boeing is doing good. They would like to do better. They would like to build a major new facility, employ 500 additional people, but there's a price to be paid. A lot of taxes would be at least forestalled for them. 50% on their real estate tax and their personal property tax. I think that also includes, so if you buy like tractors or trucks or whatever for this project, then you would not have to pay the personal property tax on it. There's something about this one that just makes the hair on my neck stand up, because if it's too good to be true, it probably is. But Bill, you on my side on that one? You don't like tax giveaway?
Yeah, you know, I've changed my mind completely. I used to be against corporate welfare, and now I like it, and I embrace it. And I think, you know, Boeing is so important to the region, and I never thought Anheuser-Busch would ever get sold. I never thought all these other big companies would leave. The Post-Dispatch would get sold. And I look and I think, hey, if Boeing wants this and it's on the if come, I know it's trying to get the next generation fighter. And so if they try to get it and they don't get it, we'll probably lose all the money we're investing in it. But I'm in favor of giving them the money. And my only question to them would be, is this enough? Seriously, I've changed my tune completely.
All right, well, let me run another one past you. Chemical Bank wants some big, for the Chemical Bank building, people want to make apartments out of it, and we need residences downtown, obviously, but they're asking for a tax break. I mean, now, personally, this one sounds feasible. Boeing doesn't. Same way?
Well, I'm all for giving the Chemical Bank people money too. You know, and I thought they were doing hotels, but if it's apartments, that's fine.
No, I thought there was going to be some residences.
I mean, they're doing hotels.
You know, downtown is in terrible shape, and I can't imagine anybody wanting to put money into it unless they're getting some kind of break. So I would tell them, you know, come on right in behind Boeing, and let's start giving you some money. I would give them money too.
Boy, I gotta say, Bill, I gotta argue with you on just a little bit of this here. You know, if there's ever a tax break I could get behind, it's gonna be something like the Boeing project, where we're talking about they're gonna create jobs. They're gonna be doing it in North County, which could really use them. But when we're talking about another hotel for downtown, we have so many hotels downtown. We have so many currently under construction. We have hotels going under because there's not enough people wanting to stay in them. I can't understand why we think giving, I think, a 90% tax abatement on another downtown hotel, it boggles my mind.
Well, and the last, if I'm not mistaken, the last next generation fighter was the one that was discontinued by the government.
Yes.
Isn't that correct? So I love the sort of backwards, you know, the way we're going into this deal, because the Boeing thing does make me nervous, because I just kept reading and waiting for a promise, and there's no promise for this line to continue.
Well, I'm confused. First of all, now that Sarah's no longer my boss, I'd like to disagree with you on both. But actually, no, not on Boeing. The chemical building is an historic building, and it's a perfect example of something that should qualify for some sort of tax credits.
90%?
Yeah, I mean, at this point downtown, I had a problem. I had a problem with the AT&T tower, which was, in my view, not historic. But when you're talking about historic preservation downtown, I'm all in. I might want to distance myself a little from the fellow founder on this, although on Boeing, I have to say, it's just our little piece of an awful and really immoral trend. And that is, it's not even amoral, it's immoral for these big companies even to be asking for tax breaks they don't need. The problem is, and it always seems perpetual, is unilateral disarmament doesn't work. Even when it comes to something, you know, I mean, we're talking about manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. The fact is that if the county or the state is not willing to basically at gunpoint agree to tax breaks for a company like Boeing, it's got a lot of other options and a lot of other cities and states and counties that would do it. And so it's a very difficult spot that politicians are put in by companies like Boeing, and I do think it's wrong, but it's the way.
I think it's clear, though. You know, when the tourism industry, for instance, you know, is always pretending that every dollar spent is like $5 because it's a multiplier effect. With Boeing, it's actually true. A big company like Boeing, those people have good-paying jobs. They buy homes, they buy cars.
But for how long? I mean, there's no guarantee, and I understand that guarantees are hard to come by at all. It does seem that this company is capitalizing or weaponizing our soft spot for the aviation or for aeronautics and the industry and the history that we have here in St. Louis. I just have such a problem with it.
Well, it's just, you know, they have no chance of getting this next generation fighter unless they spend this money.
Correct.
And so we could either say, okay, we'll let Lockheed have it or Seattle have it, or we can say, these engineers are pretty darn good. Let's give them a chance.
Okay, I want like say the promise.
Yeah.
When you hire 150 people instead of 500 and you shift some people around that already work there, then you haven't fulfilled your promise for why you got these tax breaks in the first place. And that's what okay, maybe you build it, but maybe it ends up being on a smaller scale. Or maybe you don't hire as many people. And like I say.
It used to be thousands of jobs that we would talk about when we would talk about Boeing.
Yeah, well. All right, downtown. We've had a problem with people in Airbnbs just acting crazy as heck, ripping and running, shooting, and not to make light of it. And the problem is going to be addressed by the Board of Aldermen, but they put it on hold till the fall. So that makes you kind of think maybe it's not as big a problem as everybody makes it out to be, Sarah?
It is such a big problem. You guys know I'm a proud city resident. Always have to say that. But it is the #1 thing I hear people in the city talking about. I had a story the other day about somebody who had a problem Airbnb in the basement, and I got so much feedback on this story, and most of it was from people saying, hey, I'm dealing with something like this in my neighborhood. It's not just downtown. It's happening in Shaw. It's happening in Lafayette Square. Some of our neighborhoods that we have fought to bring back from the brink and are now thriving are being threatened by this. And I think it's very frustrating to a lot of city residents that the Board of Aldermen did not make this a priority to get it done before this break. They're not even coming back till September. It's not like they're that close to consensus.
To me, it answers the question, will this Board of Aldermen be better now that it has 14 members instead of 28?
No.
The answer is a resounding no.
Yeah.
This is really outrageous. And understand, downtown, I agree with what you're saying. It's not just downtown, but downtown has the added benefit, I shouldn't say benefit, the added factor that B&Bs are definitely not hotels hotels, and in a downtown area you want hotels and so forth, and it should be such a no-brainer here. It's part of the city's lack of respect, in my view, for the downtown property owners. It's just, it really causes problems for downtown residents and adds to the crime problem. And there's really no reason that, and a lot of cities have either just banned Airbnb type facility. It's not just Airbnb. Those short-term rentals.
What's wrong with this? Who's on the other side on this?
Well,
Oh.
No, I was so ashamed of my reaction while I was reading this story because I thought, I genuinely, this decline has had some kind of an impact on my thought process and apparently my ability to speak clearly. But my first thought was, gosh, we're making it so hard. We're putting so much red tape around these Airbnb. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is like ancient Rome. That's what you have with these Airbnbs. So I think a lot of people do feel for certainly the existing downtown businesses that are competing with the Airbnbs. And then some knuckleheads like me, that knee-jerk reaction was they're trying to do something. They are no longer going to be able to do it.
Let me lean to your side here a little bit.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Once again, personal responsibility and behavior should not preclude those that actually screen their clients and this works out. And you're taking that right from them, aren't you?
But you're not, because they are not talking about a ban. There are cities that have done bans or done moratoriums. What they're talking about are some sensible regulations. I will say the opposition to what they're trying to do has come from local people who own Airbnbs, and those are investment properties. Great. I think there are ways. There are cities that have found ways where if somebody owns an extra house or two and they want to do it as a short-term rental, but we know who they are, we know how to reach them, that's not the problem in St. Louis. What's the problem is this thing called Airbnb arbitrage, where people are renting out these units who don't even live here, and they're using them and just cycling people through for parties, for things like prostitution, and there's no accountability. You can crack down on that without banning short-term rentals.
And to your point, I mean, the sharing economy is here to stay. I mean, people understand this is part of that. But as you point out, you can regulate them. And in my mind, in a downtown area, other places have just flat out banned them. And I think that they actually, when they compete with the hotel, motel industry, and I have that tourism bias you were referring to earlier, I don't think it's unreasonable not to have them at all when it comes to areas that you're trying to have visitors and so forth. But that's an extreme anti-sharing.
Well, you know, there's
go ahead.
I was just this arbitrage business. You know, I feel the same way about homes. These companies that buy a lot of homes, modest homes, and rent them out, and people can't get started because the market's already been taken. I mean, that should be stopped too.
You know what? There are some cities that are doing something about that, and once again, it's not something I see the Board of Aldermen taking leadership on. Now, they have not. This new crew has not been in that long. I want to give them some time, but I would love to see them prioritize some of the quality of life issues that residents are just screaming about.
And downtown's important. I mean, you know, and it's not.
And you're just saying it's not an either-or proposition. There's some gray area to work with.
Absolutely. I think there's ways you could do sensible regulations, and you could still have your Airbnb party.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, there is no gray area in the relationship between former comptroller and father of mayor Virvus Jones. He took issue with Ethical Society Police, called them the slave patrol this week. Quite frankly, I've been very, like I say, against the actions of ESOP, Ethical Society of Police. And quite frankly, I think they have, they're reaping what they sowed. And I don't have a problem with what he said. But do you, Ray?
Yeah, I do. I love Virvus, as you know, and an old friend. I mean, I don't care how he said it so much. It's his prerogative. I happen to be a fan of the Ethical Society Police. I very much disagreed with them, and I know this is what you're alluding to, when they joined with the police union in calling for reinstituting state control of police. I thought they were completely wrong about that. But overall, if you look at their total body of work, both in the city and county, I think the Ethical Society of Police, which is, I believe, the first black officers union in the country to feel a need to exist because of the racially challenged views of the police union, I think they've done great stuff. And I think a good example of the hostility that I truly don't understand are the mayor's Mayor Jones's administration is Heather Taylor, who's a key figure in ESOP, who's been really treated unfairly, in my mind, by the city, appealing and reappealing her very valid case of discrimination against the police. And I think it's really not a great thing for Mayor Jones that they continue to have this little war with ESOP.
Okay, all right.
I do have a problem with the way Virvus is. He has become the official flamethrower paterfamilias in chief, and it makes me uncomfortable to hear any African American infer that any other African Americans are slave hunters, to imply that they are on the same level as slave hunters, or that their own history is any less painful. That I just have a problem with that as an observer.
I was going to say, I thought it was good when ESOP and the Police Association were on the same side on something. I mean, it's almost like a kumbaya moment. I mean,
Exactly.
You know, so I didn't share your unhappiness about that.
It's hard enough to be a black police officer in this city, you know, to have the mayor's dad then coming after you and alluding to you being the slave patrol. I felt like these officers are facing so many challenges. And while I didn't agree with their quest to get state patrol of the police department, they are a union fighting for their members. I mean, they're not negotiating the contracts, but they're there as like an organizing body. And if these members feel like they could get a better shake under the state than they do under the city, I think we should listen to that. I'm not in favor of making that change whatsoever, but they feel like things weren't going well at that point. I think that's valid. That's their experience. And then to attack them over it.
I just, like I said, they created this field of play. And now they're going to get insulted. Well, I was insulted by their actions. I still am. And I'll just tell you, you know, if black people are discussing other black people, you walk in their house and nobody else is around, you're going to hear a lot of things. You might say, like, man, I can't believe they said that. But that's just the reality of it. And you know, a bridge too far, ESOP. And hopefully, you know, y'all can build some relationship with the mayor and all that. But you drew the line. And if you're mad because people are mad at you, that's too bad. Okay, a man named Johnny Johnson is facing the death penalty, but there's some question about his mental fitness to be executed. And Sarah, you had a great story in Riverfront Times, and I feel like whatever's going on, this gentleman needs to go.
Well, this murder that he committed, and there is no doubt he committed this murder, this is, you know, among the most heinous murders that I have ever read about in all my years as a reporter. I mean, this was a 6-year-old girl, this was an attempted rape, this was bashing her head in with a brick. I mean, it's horrible. And yet, you know, the Supreme Court has found you can't execute people unless they are sane enough to understand what's going on around them. And his lawyers they filed a 72-page brief where it seems pretty clear this guy has a history of schizophrenia that long predates this terrible act and was on very serious medication in and out of psychiatric clinics, multiple suicide attempts even before this terrible crime that he committed. And they're saying by the standard of the Supreme Court, you can't execute this man at this point. And the appeals court looked at this and they said, hey, yeah, we got to slow this down. We are staying this execution. We want to have time to have some arguments back and forth. There have been a number of people, I believe 4, put to death by the state of Missouri in recent months, many of them in many ways more sympathetic than this man, and in no case did the courts intervene to stop this.
Right.
It's interesting that in this case they're saying, there are some real legal questions here.
And that even the father of the victim is asking for leniency.
I thought that was so interesting.
That's amazing on religious grounds.
Right, I was going to say, it's the Casey Williamson case that was a huge story, as it should be, 2 decades ago. I mean, one part of the story that doesn't get discussed, which is just unbelievable, is that cases like this go 20 years. That to me is unfathomable at any level, regardless of what you think. I've circled this issue. I think at the time I was still for the death penalty back then. I'm against it now. The reason I'm against it is the DNA evidence has shown we have at least 1 a year where they find out that they get the wrong person, which means
I think he's the right person.
Well, no, there's no question on that. And as I say, this is both. If you're for the death penalty, it's obviously about as understandable a case as possible. I mean, it was just one of the most heinous crimes on record. On the other hand, you know, I'm against it just because I'm just not sold that we get it right. And I will say that, to your point, there was pretty credible evidence on this case that there are questions about whether he really understood this. And this case has been going on forever. The Supreme Court, Missouri Supreme Court, first rejected the argument about his mental illness. I want to say it's 2012. This case just goes on, and it's a painful one, that's for sure.
Well, I've changed my mind on this, too. I mean, I've been a state witness at 3 executions, and I used to support the death penalty, and I no longer do, and it really doesn't have anything to do with DNA evidence for me or not. I was just convinced of the moral side of the equation that I was on the wrong side.
All right. Okay. Wow. Entertainer named Sexyy Red did a little show, and that's quite a segue between topics. Did a show in the Hazelwood School District, and apparently it got completely out of hand. Not that, you know, hip-hop or rap music shouldn't be, you know, entertaining in a high school, but this just seemed like a really bad idea, Wendy.
Well, the performer known as Sexyy Red came out with her middle fingers flying. Yeah. So that sort of set the tone for the performance. I feel like the story is actually just that the grown-ups have surrendered. I mean, just surrendered. Common sense in attempt to bring the children back into the classroom in every way, you know, in the curiosity and the love of learning, and seeing everything that a place of learning has to offer in terms of a future. So what does this have to do with that? I don't understand. But I will give them credit. I think that their heart, just because I do think their hearts were in the right place, in the same way that television sets to get kids to go to the first day of school sounds crazy to people who aren't actually inside the schools, you know, who don't understand what educators are up against. But this was a flaming disaster.
This was another Riverfront Time story. So yeah. I wanted to go to, I almost said Wendy, I wanted to go to Sarah, just because you got the video, so you've seen it, and it's posted now.
It's posted, and I will say, I really want Hazelwood Central to answer our questions about this. They have not returned our calls, and we've been calling them now for a couple weeks. Like, what were they thinking? How did this go so awry? I appreciate that they want to meet the students where they're at. They wanted to get them revved up at a pep rally. This wasn't like she was coming into a classroom. I think a pep rally can be an appropriate place for a rapper. It's hard to defend how this one went down. They certainly needed more control over the crowd, and to have told her, you don't come in with your 2 middle fingers blazing.
Right.
Shout out to, I'm a little biased about the Riverfront Times still, but shout out to the Riverfront Times because it was a good story.
It's a great story.
I will say, I'm not sympathetic to Hazelwood Central. It may surprise you, just because in this era of the culture war, the side of sane people and reasonable people do not need this kind of headline and example for fodder for those who want to censor our schools and ban the books and do all the other evil things that the right wants to do to schools. This was just such poor judgment on their part, and I don't know what they expected. What was poor judgment,
inviting her?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think
really was just bad
desperate educators.
What did you expect was going to happen? You know, I'm sorry.
I'm not saying they should try to bring in Nat King Cole or something.
No.
Or Johnny Mathis, but I don't think the hip-hop culture has been working for people. And the gangster stuff and the shoot 'em up. And I think it's just a terrible idea to bring in Sexyy Red to a high school.
I mean, are you really surprised? I mean, and again, I have to be, I'm unhip enough to have never heard of Sexyy Red before. And I had no problem with Sexyy Red, other than the fact that Are you really surprised at this outcome?
No.
I mean, it's such poor judgment. Again, I'm sorry, it just didn't make good sense. And Hazelwood, of all things, I remember being on our dear departed Martin Dugan, the Hazelwood East was on a completely the other
last
way.
minute. I don't think just inviting a hip-hop artist, a rap artist, goes awry like this. Now, apparently, from your story, there was guns and marijuana and fights breaking out. And I can't just say that it was because, I agree with you, and I've said this before, that, boy, that hip-hop culture, it ain't doing us a lot of good. But in this case, I will say that it's not just the fact that they invited the hip-hop folk.
Thank you, Alvin.
It's either the ones they did invite or they just weren't in control of the situation.
There wasn't a framework of...
Right. This could have been done properly. You kind of have to meet the kids where they are, but then you also have to find a way to do this professionally.
All right. We got to go to the letters. The debate regarding removing anti-racism messages in Francis Howell School would be much more informative if those who declared posted school signs and slogans are meaningless had actually visited schools everywhere to inspire and help students succeed daily. That from Helene J. Sherman of Chesterfield, Missouri. I could not wrap my mind around the support for continued cash bail by everyone except Ray last Thursday. If a poor man and a rich man are both accused of the same crime and both are deemed release-worthy, why should the rich man be able to buy his freedom while the poor man sits incarcerated until trial? That from Eric Ressner of Rock Hill, Missouri, and Ray Hartmann fan. You can send a letter to Donnybrook, care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Send us an email to donnybrook@9pbs.org. Or we got the little Twitter bird up there, but it's now called X, #DonnybrookSTL. Give us a call, Donnybrook comment line, 314-512-9094. And if you're not able to catch us live and in color, well, not actually live, but it's 7 o'clock, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, TuneIn, podcasts. Sarah Fenske, thank you so much for sitting in this week. Thank you for all the great stories we used today on this show.
Thanks for using them.
Our source material.
There you go. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching the show. We really do appreciate it, and we really do want you to be safe, stay cool, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.